Joan Schell was the second victim in the Michigan murders. Joan Schell was born December 1st, 1947 in New Paris, Wisconsin. From Wisconsin, Joan moved to Plymouth, Michigan, before moving into a shared house on Emmett Street in Ypsilanti, Michigan to live out her college years. Joan was an art student attending Eastern Michigan University. Joan Schell was unfortunately last seen by her roommate Susan Colby on the evening of June 30th. Schell was headed to a Washtenaw Avenue bus stop with intent to travel to see her boyfriend in Ann Arbor. Susan Colby accompanied Joan to the bus stop. Later, it was investigated that Joan had made mention to Susan Colby that she was going to hitchhike due to her missing the last bus. The first vehicle that stopped to offer a ride was a red and black Pontiac Bonneville with 3 young men. The driver was described as a 20-year-old male with clean-cut, short, dark side-parted hair. Colby was still with Joan at this point and tried to get Joan to decline the ride. Joan promised to call her roommate upon arrival at her boyfriend's house in Ann Arbor. Colby reported her roommate Joan Schell missing less than 3 hours later, after no call or contact. Police eliminated more than 150 registered red-black vehicles in the state of Michigan and compared physical traits to the composite drawing of the driver's description Colby had given. On July 5, 1968, Joan Schell's body was found partially decomposed and mutilated. Joan had 25 stab wounds that punctured her lung, liver, and carotid artery. One wound was so deep behind her left ear, it fractured her skull. Joan Schell's throat had been slashed, and around her throat was tied a miniskirt that she was wearing the day of her disappearance. It was said that Joan Schell's body, from the breast up, was in a more advanced state of decomposition, where the lower half of her body was more preserved. A pathologist ruled that she was stored in a naturally cold environment, but the upper part of her body was exposed to natural heat. Investigators believe that the lack of blood near the body meant she had only been in her found location for less than 24 hours. 2 months after Joan Schell's murder, police interviewed 2 eyewitnesses that stated John Collins was alongside with Schell when she was walking down Emmett Street on the evening that she disappeared. Police offered a $7,800 reward for anybody to come forward with information of the Joan Schell homicide, as well as the Mary Flessar homicide. On another occasion, a witness account was given by Arnold Davis. Arnold Davis was the driver of the original car that Joan first hitchhiked with. John Collins insisted that he give Schell a ride to Ann Arbor, and they exited out of Arnold Davis' vehicle and proceeded to get into John's. 3 hours later, John returns back to his apartment with Joan's red handbag on his hand, stating she left it in his car. Collins proceeds to tell his roommate Arnold that Joan was a bitch and claimed that he had dropped her off in Ann Arbor after her not being sexually interested in him. Arnold Davis reported always having a suspicion towards John Collins, but was always way too afraid to say anything. John Collins was interviewed by the police and claimed that he did not know Schell, and that he had spent the weekend of the 29th of June through the 30th with his mother in Centerline, a suburb of Detroit. John's alibi was never questioned. Joan Elspeth Schell was the second of 7 grisly murders that happened in Michigan. Stay tuned to hear more of these 7 grisly murders.